Oh, baby. Welcome back to another episode of OC and TJ featuring your boy, OC. I'm kidding. Maybe. Uh, Welcome to another picks episode. We're already on to week 7. Week 6 was definitely full of excitement and drama, per usual, but we always get fresh material pretty much at every single game. Coaches got fired. Quarterbacks are making their first starts of the season. And, yeah, it's just it's been freaking crazy already. So that being said, let's jump into this Thursday night football game, starting with the New Orleans Saints versus the Denver Broncos in the Superdome. It'll be Sean Payton's first time making it back to that stadium since he resigned in 2021. And dear Lord, this is going to be an ugly football game. And mainly it's going to be because of a lot of key injuries. There's no Patrick Surtain for the Broncos. New Orleans is going to be without Rashid Shaheed, and they won't have Chris Olave. So, and they still have Derek Carr out with that oblique injury. So you got your starting quarterback and your two best receivers out going up against the Broncos defense that's still a top 10 unit, but just lost to the Chargers 23-16 at home for the first time in who knows how long, probably since 2018. So let's, both teams lost pretty badly. So I think we should just start with the Broncos here because it was a little less worse. It was a little better than how the Saints lost. But it was still horrible nonetheless. So of all the quarterbacks that I had a jinx in the world when it came to, improvement and getting this team on the right track and maybe positioning yourself in for the playoffs, I had to do it with Bo Nix. And leading up to this game, he actually did pretty well through the first 3 weeks. He didn't turn the ball over. He was starting to make the right decisions. Yeah, he kind of stunk it up against the Jets, but I figured, you know what? With better development and as long as he held onto the football, the Broncos would be in good shape. And it doesn't matter that he had a bunch of garbage time stats in the fourth quarter of this game. 15 of 19 for 189 yards and 2 touchdowns. Leading up to that fourth quarter against LA, who has the top 10 defense themselves, mind you, he was 5 of 14 for 27 yards with no touchdown passes. And on his first pass attempt, he threw an interception. So once you saw that, I just had the feeling that, okay, this is going to be a long day for the Denver Broncos. And their defense does not get that much of a pass either because they were on the field for way too long. The Chargers were 11 for 18 on third down. They held onto the ball for 37 minutes. Justin Herbert spread the ball around to 9 different receivers. And J.K. Dobbins fell 4 yards short of 100 on 25 carries. But they still did their best in the fourth quarter. In the second half, the Chargers only had 104 yards. Denver scored 16 unanswered. So while the effort was there, it was too little too late. But hopefully they can use this short week to readjust and make sure that they minimize their mistakes. God willing, considering that their rookie is still going through too many growing pains. The potential's there, but he has been hitting way too many bumps along the road. But same thing with Spencer Rattler, who made his first career start against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at home. And this game really took us into a lot of different directions. The Bucs get off to a 17-0 start in the first quarter. They score on the opening drive. Then Antoine Winfield has a scoop and score, and it looks like the Saints are out of place. Second quarter, it's a completely different ball game. Baker Mayfield throws 3 interceptions. New Orleans ends up scoring 20 unanswered points, and then they eventually take a 3-point lead heading into the halftime break. So this was geared up for an upset. And to be quite honest, I really didn't know how the second half was going to play out. But, Tampa got their focus back. They made the adjustments they needed to. They realized the challenges that were ahead of them. And they proceeded to go on a 27-0 scoring run to win the game by 24. The final score was 51-27. In the second half, Baker Mayfield had a perfect passer rating. Chris Godwin, he had 125 yards and 2 touchdowns on 11 catches. And keep in mind, they didn't have Rachaad White, who's their starting running back, yet they still ran for 277 yards on the ground. Sean Tucker, he recently won the NFC Offensive Player of the Week. He had 14 touches for 136 yards. He had 56 more through the air as a receiving back. Bucky Irving, he had 81 yards on 14 touches. That combined is 211 yards. That was, to me, the biggest stunner of the night because This Saints defense was supposed to be the biggest strength that this team had. It's why Dennis Allen was promoted as the head coach to begin with. And so far to this season, they have been outright horrible. They're one of the worst passing defenses in the league. They're right near the bottom in scoring. They don't get that much pressure on the quarterback. And the offense doesn't do that much better with, the limitations in that 4-week slump. But at the same time, this defense was supposed to be the reason why they would stay competitive. And they give up 277 yards on the ground. They give up close to 600 total for the entire afternoon. Tampa went 6 of 10 on third down, 4 for 5 in the red zone. And Baker Mayfield completely overcame those interceptions. And all it took were 3 broken tackles on a 55-yard touchdown at Godwin and an interception from Rattler to start the fourth quarter for it to get completely out of hand. And now we get to the rookie, the former number 1 recruit in the country, one of the best college quarterbacks through the first 2 seasons at Oklahoma. And then he ends up losing a starting job to Caleb Williams, ultimately transfers to South Carolina, and then gets drafted in the 5th round, if I'm not mistaken. But, in the first half, he looked solid. He didn't look out of place. He made comfortable throws out of the pocket. He had a stronger arm than I ever thought. Threw a sweet touchdown pass to Bub Means. And I thought, all right, this kid could be pretty solid. And then in the second half, Tampa completely exposed him. He completed less than 50% of his passes in that span. Only threw for 103 yards. No touchdowns thrown. 2 picks. And, that's pretty much what you expect from a guy thrown into the fire in an emergency start. And, it didn't help that he didn't have his best receiver. He got ruled out due to a concussion. Chris Olave, on the third play of the game, or on their third play of the game, I should say, because, the defender drilled him upside the head. Ball comes out. Antoine Winfield scoops it up. And, the rest is unfortunately history for New Orleans. So heading into this game on Thursday night, New Orleans is really bagged up, and Denver is a good quarterback away and a really good offense away, mind you, from actually being a respectable team this year. Denver's 3-3. The Saints have lost 4 straight. So again, this is going to be a really ugly night. But I'm going to go with the Broncos here. I just really don't know how the Saints are going to be able to overcome the injuries on the offensive side. Again, no Olave, no Rashid Shaheed, no Derek Carr. You don't really know what you have in Spencer Rattler. You can see the upside, but at the same time, you want to be able to see him try to continue to grow and make sure he develops into a somewhat decent player. Again, for a guy making a second start, I don't know if we're going to expect too much of anything. But against this Broncos defense, I expect a lot more growing pains and bumps because listen, last week was not that great of a performance, but at the same time, I think they still did whatever they could to try to win the game in the second half. It was just the fact that their quarterback kept turning the ball over and had no accuracy whatsoever. So if Bo Nix can clean up those mistakes and at least have a decent showing and not dink and dunk his way down the field on every single drive and not turn the ball over ad nauseum, then I think the Broncos can squeak by here. So I don't expect a lot of points to be scored. I think both offenses are going to really struggle big time. And unfortunately, I think we're going to get a pretty cranky Al Michaels because, listen, it's not the first broadcast where we've seen him just fed up with a team's incompetence. So I'll take the Broncos here, but I think they'll be able to pull this one out 20-9. So again, neither offense is going to look great. I expect a lot of field goals, a lot of punts early on, and ultimately one of these defenses is going to get exhausted. I expect it to be the Saints just because of all the injuries, but it would not shock me one bit if Bo Nix cost Denver another winnable situation here. So I'll leave it at that. Next, we travel to London for the 3rd straight game taken in that country, in that city, and in the continent of England, or the continent of Europe. Golly. Yep. Tell no one. But anyways, the Jaguars, after getting destroyed by the Chicago Bears 35-16, they're staying put. They're going to be fully acclimated, and they're going to be welcoming the New England Patriots, who have lost their 5th straight game and are still pretty trash. But at the same time, they're at least happy with the fact that Drake Maye is their quarterback. A lot of areas that still need to be improved upon. He turned the ball over 3 times. Austin Hooper lost a fumble. He got sacked 4 times, 3 of them by Will Anderson. But for a guy making his first start against a top 10 defense, he looked a lot better than I thought. He threw 3 touchdown passes. His first was a beauty down the sideline to Kayshon Boutte. And, he was comfortable in the pocket. He made plays on the run. And most of the turnovers he had were not his fault. The first one definitely was because he overthrew to Mario Douglas. The second one, not only did it get tipped, but Eric Murray completely snagged it as he was getting blocked by an offensive lineman on an attempted screen pass. And then the third turnover was a strip sack by Danielle Hunter. That probably would not have happened if he didn't have someone named DeMontre Jacobs or Zach Thomas protecting him at right tackle. And the O-line is still in shambles. We're down to our third center, freaking Ben Brown, who is a converted guard, who's only started because they decided to cut Nick Leverett, the backup, and David Andrews is out for the rest of the season because of a shoulder surgery. But Darian Lowe is still at left tackle, who has been better, but not really the guy you can really depend upon as your blindside guy. The left guard is Michael Jordan, not that one. The right guard is Uwendu. He's still solid. And, at this point, it's like you can only ask Drake Maye to do so much because they didn't have Ramondre Stevenson, so they couldn't really run the ball the way they used to. They did their best to try to keep up, but the defense is so injured and limited that they literally have no resistance against any opposition. They're horrible against the run. They gave up 192 yards, 130 total to Joe Mixon, and then middle of the fourth quarter, they broke 3 tackles on a Dameon Pierce 54-yard score that probably should not have happened. It was really just the play was there for the Patriots defense to stop. They just could not tackle whatsoever. Ever since Shawan Bentley tore his pec against the Seahawks, they have been flat out horrible. Christian Gonzalez is their only best player, and he's even getting beat on a couple touchdowns. They don't have a good secondary. Yeah, they had an interception, but really it was on the tight end for dropping a wide-open touchdown pass. And the only guy that can really generate consistent pressure is Keon White. So, again, C.J. Stroud got sacked 3 times, but, that's what you're going to get from this defensive line. You're going to see them show flashes and spurts, but they just don't have any depth at this point. So, they might have a promising quarterback, but he has no help around him. The O-line is a mess. The receivers were better, and maybe Drake Maye being there gave them a kickstart and an energy boost that they desperately needed since the start of the season. But, they're 1-5 for a reason. They just don't have any talent on this roster whatsoever. And who knows? Maybe against this Jaguars team, they'll at least find a way to bounce back because Jacksonville is flat out terrible. Their defense forces back-to-back 3-and-outs. They pick off Caleb Williams, and they're only down 14-3 at halftime. But after Evan Ingram fumbled the ball away on the first play of the second half, it completely got out of hand. Caleb Williams threw 4 touchdown passes. He made even better plays with his legs on a few scrambles. He finished that day with 56 yards on the ground while also throwing for, I think, 227. Let me pull that up right here. Yeah, 226 yards with 4 touchdown passes, and he only made 1 bad decision, which was the interception. Trevor Lawrence, he got sacked 3 times, but at the same time, his receivers did not do him any favors. There were at least 4 dropped touchdown passes. He threw an interception. He got dumped a few times. Travis Etienne had nowhere to go. He was obviously banged up and had no running room. Tank Bigsby only had 24 yards and 7 carries. Even Mac Jones got bottled up on a garbage time possession. So Jacksonville ended up scoring 2 touchdowns in the second half, but they were down double digits both times. Cole Kmet, not only did he catch 2 touchdowns, but he was the emergency long snapper because the starter got hurt. So he obviously was the do-everything guy, which is actually pretty fun to see. Keenan Allen caught 2 touchdowns, which was awesome. Rome Odunze made big plays. DeAndre Swift had 91 yards on the ground. And listen, I'm not sold on Chicago as a top team yet because their 4 wins have come against the Panthers, the Titans, the Jaguars, and the Rams. All 4 of them only have 1 win for the season. But there's a new era arriving in Chicago because they finally have a quarterback. They finally have a reliable offense, and the defense has been playing outstanding. So I think that when they start beating tougher competition and when they start living up to expectations against the teams that they need to beat to establish themselves in the playoff picture, then I think Chicago will be in great shape. But with Jacksonville, I mean, Doug Peterson said after the game that they need a culture change, and I just completely scoffed because this man is the head coach that was supposed to turn it around. They brought him in to completely remove the stench that was the Urban Meyer era. He takes them back to the playoffs. They win the division. They come back from a 27-0 deficit against the Chargers to win their first playoff game since 2017. And since then, they've been on a complete downward spiral. You know, they start off 2023, 8-3, first place in the AFC South. Then they lose 5 of their final 6 games to miss the playoffs and completely collapse. Now they're 1-5 with one of the worst records in the NFL. Their offense has completely regressed. The defense is still abysmal. And Doug Peterson, showing no intangibles or traits to try to turn this team around, has been exposed as a complete hack. It's like Blake Bortles and Doug Marrone never left because you're literally seeing the same thing that happened in 2007, 2018, and 2019 take place 5 years later. You know, 2017, they surprised everybody by making it to the AFC Championship. They have one of the best defenses in the league. Their quarterback starts to turn it around. They have an outstanding rookie running back in Leonard Fournette. They go down to the wire with the New England Patriots. They come up short. And then the next year, they completely implode. They go 5-11. Blake Bortles gets cut the following year. Leonard Fournette does not get involved in the offense the way that he used to be in this rookie year. The defense starts to show a lot of, the defense starts to, what's the right word for it? It's not, they didn't regress, but you just knew that there was a lot of internal tension and drama. And then in 2019, they pretty much blow up the whole roster. You know, they trade Jalen Ramsey away. They trade Calais Campbell. Telvin Smith walks away. They let go some of the key starters that made the Jaguars into the hopeful franchise that they were in 2017, and they completely bottom out. They go 1-15 in 2020. They fire Dave Caldwell, the GM. They fire Doug Marrone, the head coach. They draft Trevor Lawrence. They draft Urban Meyer. We all know what happened that season, and you know the rest of the story. So, honestly, he's talking about there needs to be a culture change, and they got to find a way to turn around. No, you have to find a way to turn it around. You're the freaking head coach. You were hired for a reason because you were supposed to turn it around. You were supposed to revive Trevor Lawrence's career, and you were supposed to put this team back in the championship map for the first time in, 30 years? Again, 5 years or 7 years if you want to count 2017. And since then, it has just been an absolute disaster. So London is going to get a really fantastic showing here between two of the worst teams in football. So the rest of America is going to have an outstanding morning here. Honestly, this game could really go either way. You know, the Jaguars are supposed to have more talent. They're supposed to have a better roster, but nothing has gone right for them so far. Their defense is once again only relying on Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker. You know, the offense cannot do anything freaking right. And the Patriots just don't have any talent on their roster. You know, they, are trying to do their best to try to rebuild and to try to build around their quarterback, but they can't do anything right, unfortunately. But I'll be honest, I kind of like the Patriots' chances here. And I know that's saying a lot because they have a horrible offensive line and their defense can't do anything when it's not at full strength. But at the same time, I have a lot more faith in Drake Maye than I do with Trevor Lawrence because, listen, Drake Maye might be a rookie. It might only be one game. But at the same time, I just really don't know how the Jaguars can turn it around unless they play the Colts at home. That's the only other time I actually have faith in the Jaguars winning a football game. So I think it'll be really close. I think both offenses will play extremely well. Both defenses are going to have a hard time getting needed stops. But listen, I think if you give Drake Maye the ball last in the final minutes, then I think we could see something special here. So I'll pick New England. Might be a little biased, but I say they win this game 27-24. And with that being said, let's move into Sunday afternoon's festivities, beginning with the Buffalo Bills versus the Tennessee Titans. Both of them are coming off ugly games. One of them actually won. The other self-destructed and lost, per usual. Let's start with the Tennessee Titans here because they are the ones coming off the defeat. Defense did not get off to a great start. They gave up a wide-open touchdown to Josh Downs on the opening drive. But on their next possession, Amani Hooker gave this team a spark with an interception and returned it into Indianapolis territory. And, that led to a wide-open touchdown to Nick Westbrook-Akina. And on the following possession, the Titans kick a field goal to take a 3-point lead. So they scored 10 unanswered points. The defense gives up 26 more yards of offense, before the final drive of the first half. And Tennessee is in good shape. The Colts kick a field goal on their final drive to tie the game heading into the break. But to start the third quarter, Tony Pollard makes 3 defenders miss on 3rd and 19. He has an amazing 23-yard touchdown run. And the Titans have the lead. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, as long as Will Levis doesn't screw up and as long as they keep their foot on the gas, they're going to be in great shape. But not only does the defense fall flat, but the offense completely self-destructs. Joe Flacco leads 2 straight scoring drives. He has 10 unanswered points. One of them a clutch touchdown pass to Michael Pittman on 3rd and 9, where he has to deal with the cover 0 blitz. He throws it up for grabs, and Pittman beats L'Jarius Sneed on the jump for the score. And that gives the Colts a 3-point lead. But after that second half touchdown drive, the Titans offense only has 39 more yards, and they don't get on the board for the rest of the day. Will Levis in the fourth quarter was 3 of 10 for 25 yards, and when it was time for him to deliver a win or to deliver extra points on a drive where they needed to stay in the ball game, he throws a back-breaking interception to Julian Blackmon that essentially seals the deal. So, once again, Will Levis completely fell apart. They were undisciplined. They sucked when it mattered most. He only finished the game with 95 yards, which is pretty much everything you need to know about how he couldn't live up to expectations. But the defense was undisciplined as well. The team committed 11 penalties for 113 yards. There were a good amount of flags on both sides of the ball. They were 4 for 11 on 3rd down. And the fact of the matter is the Colts didn't even play that great of a game either. But you know what? They stepped up when they were needed the most. They made bigger plays in the most important moments. And when it was time for them to win the game, they didn't screw it up. That was what the Titans did, and that is why they're one of the worst teams in the league. That is why they're 1-4. The Bills are not that much better because even though they won the game, it was one of the most frustrating performances I have ever watched. Not in the first half, though, because I was actually really excited. Both offenses played great. Josh Allen had 3 touchdowns. Aaron Rodgers threw a vintage Hail Mary. Neither defense could really get off the field. And I thought, if this is what the first half was, I just can't wait to see what the second half is going to bring us. And instead, we got one of the most penalty-ridden halves of football that I have probably ever watched in my entire life. Both teams committed 11 penalties. Buffalo committed 8 of them in the second half, while the Jets committed 7. And it felt like both teams were doing everything they could to lose the game. The offenses kept stalling out. Both kickers whiffed on several kicks that could have been extra points or could have been needed points for their teams to pull away. But it was still time in the middle of the fourth quarter. Both teams were in position to try to win the football game. And Aaron Rodgers had 3 drives into scoring territory, but he failed on all 3 of them. They couldn't reach the end zone. They settled for 3 field goal attempts, and Greg Zuerlein doinked 2 of them. 2 doinks. So that was flat out abysmal. But you know what? Buffalo, they didn't play that great, but they could run the ball extremely well. Ray Davis had an outstanding game. He had 94 yards on the ground, 55 through the air. And on their second to last drive of the fourth quarter, they did whatever needed to be done to march down the field, to get into field goal range. They actually minimized the penalties here, but they still stalled out for a 25-yard field goal. And Tyler Bass, who missed on an extra point and a field goal earlier, drilled the ball through the uprights to give the Bills a 3-point lead. But they still gave Aaron Rodgers about 3 minutes and 25 seconds left for them to win the football game or to at least send it into overtime. So Buffalo's defense could not relax there. And honestly, on 3rd and 16, close to midfield, Aaron Rodgers threw a prayer to Mike Williams, who was open down the right sideline, yet the ball was underthrown. The receiver slipped as he was trying to make the adjustment, and Teron Johnson dove across to come up with the game-sealing interception. All it took was one more first down for Buffalo to run the clock out, and Josh Allen used his legs to pick up the first down and essentially win the game for the Buffalo Bills here. So, again, both offenses were putrid in the second half, but at least the Bills had a cleaner game. And, when it mattered the most, they delivered. The Jets, they had plenty of chances to win. They got to the red zone 4 times, yet they only scored a touchdown on one of them, which was on their second possession of the game. So, honestly, I really don't know where the Bills go from here. I know that they're going to be, they're right in first place in the AFC East, but yesterday morning, they made a big splash by trading for Amari Cooper. They get a 6th-round pick while they send Cleveland a 3rd and I think a 7th, if I'm not mistaken, a 6th or a 7th. But the point is, they're giving Josh Allen a veteran number 1 option. He's going to help open up the field for guys like Keon Coleman and Dalton Kincaid and Khalil Shakir. And listen, I don't know if they're going to be I don't know if they're going to be like a lights out offense where they're setting records, but you know what? Amari Cooper is still playing the game extremely well at a high level, and when they get James Cook back healthy, then I think Buffalo's offense is going to be in really great shape, and they're going to take a lot of pressure off of their defense, who's been dealing with a lot of injuries. They didn't have Ed Oliver, they didn't have Matt Milano, and they were really essentially, and Von Miller was suspended for 4 games, so they were really trying to hang in there and make sure that their team stayed out in front. And unlike last week, they at least managed the game a hell of a lot better. So, listen, I think the Bills are still a top 10 team in the league. I don't know necessarily if they're the biggest threat to the Chiefs just yet, because we have yet to see how they're able to perform over the next couple of months. But listen, they had a great first half. They struggled in the second, but they delivered on time in the fourth quarter. And again, that was really all that was needed to try to win this football game. And thankfully, they'll have a more relaxing performance against the Tennessee Titans. The Bills are going to win. It's going to be a blowout. I do not see Tennessee staying in this game one single bit. I know that they have a solid defense, but as long as Will Levis is their starting quarterback, I just don't have any hope for this football team right now. Calvin Ridley is complaining that he's not getting the ball early. He had 8 targets, 0 catches. Only 2 targets in the first half, and he's getting paid $30 million. He's not getting paid to catch only 9 passes through the first 5 games or to have 0 against the freaking Indianapolis Colts with one of the worst defenses in the league. Half of that is on quarterback play, half of that is on coaching, and a good amount of it is on Calvin Ridley too, because for the fact of the matter is, you knew what situation you were heading into, you took the money, and you pretty much said, I don't care if we don't win a lot of football games or if we lose a lot. I just want the money. I want to be able to prove my value and my worth, and rightfully so, because that's what players should do. But at the same time, if it's all about winning, then you wouldn't have been able to. You wouldn't have joined this franchise. You probably would have signed with a real contender. Somebody that probably wouldn't have used you as a number 1, but would have at least been able to utilize your skill sets to put you in the best positions possible for you to succeed. So I'll leave it at that. I think the Bills are going to win. It's going to be a blowout. I think Josh Allen is going to have a great game. But more importantly, I think this defense is going to have one of its more dominant performances of the season. Again, against Will Levis with an inferior offensive line and a decent running game, but an underperforming receiving group, I think that this is the type of game where Buffalo's defense comes out guns a-blazing. And more importantly, again, unless Will Levis turns back the clock to his first ever start against the Falcons where he dices them up for 4 touchdowns, I just don't really see Buffalo losing this football game. So I'll say they win 41-6. Yeah, I said it wasn't going to be close at all because, again, you got an outstanding quarterback, you got a way better offense, and you have a better coach defense. So those are really the ingredients that you need to beat a vastly inferior football team. So, okie dokie. Now we get to a more exciting grudge match between the Houston Texans and the Green Bay Packers in Lambeau Field. I pretty much broke the Texans already. I pretty much analyzed the Texans' performance against the Patriots already just a week ago or a few days ago against New England Patriots. Defense played great. They did what they needed to do. They sacked Drake Maye 4 times. Will Anderson had a hat-trick performance with 3 sacks. He was unstoppable off the left edge. They shut down the run. They forced 4 turnovers. That led to 17 Houston points. And while C.J. Stroud threw for under 200 yards, he still had 3 touchdown passes. He didn't really need to be a hero the way that he used to. And more importantly, he heavily relied on the running game. Joe Mixon had a phenomenal performance coming back from injury. He had over 130 yards. Dameon Pierce had that ice-breaking touchdown run in the 4th quarter where he broke through 3 tackles. And this is without Nico Collins. So the fact of the matter is, even though it was against a banged-up Patriots defense, and they are one of the worst teams in the league, I've been waiting for Houston to finally have a dominating performance. And they took advantage of their opponent's mistakes. Their offense was almost unstoppable throughout the entire afternoon. And, they put the game away the way that they were supposed to do, which is really all that you could ask for against, one of the worst teams in the league. When it comes to the Green Bay Packers, though, they had a more respectable performance. They beat the Arizona Cardinals at home. You could say, well, the Cardinals are not that really good of a football team, but they just recently came back from a 13-point deficit against the San Francisco 49ers. So there has to be a little bit of respect when it comes to their side. But, Green Bay was able to be back at full strength on offense. They got back Christian Watson. They got back Romeo Doubs. Defensively, Jair Alexander was able to establish himself as the number 1 corner on that team. And they pretty much had a near flawless performance. Jordan Love threw 4 touchdown passes. They were 7 for 12 on 3rd down. If it wasn't for Bo Melton slipping on a route in the middle of the 2nd quarter, Jordan Love wouldn't have even had an interception. And they held the ball for 37 minutes with only just 1 punt. Jordan Love reminded us why he is one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league. They were heavily efficient. And it wasn't like the Cardinals were completely punked. It was just that they could not stop getting in their own way. They fell behind 24-0 early. Then they scored 13 unanswered points. They were able to take advantage off of that interception, late in the 2nd quarter. And it was still a ball game to start the 3rd quarter. But after they gave up the 4 touchdown pass to Jordan Love, the Cardinals offense fumbled the ball on 3 straight drives. And the Packers fell on top of all of them. So that pretty much summed up this whole blowout performance. Again, moving the ball was not too much of an issue for the Cardinals. It was just being able to hold on to it. And they wouldn't have won this game either way. The Packers were the way better team. But the Cardinals' fumbles completely cost them in making this competitive. So, I never know what to expect from Arizona here. 1 week they're coming back from a 13-point deficit against the 49ers. They blow out the Rams at week 2. Yet they get destroyed by the Commanders, the Lions, the Bills, and now the Packers. So I think we pretty much know what type of football team they're going to be. They're capable of having these stolen victories, yet when it comes to going up against real teams, they're going to get overwhelmed. Whether it's early in the game or late, eventually they're going to completely collapse. So the Packers completely took advantage of that. And this is going to be an even harder test because the Texans have a top 10 defense. They have one of the best young quarterbacks in the game in C.J. Stroud. And even though Nico Collins is still out, they still have plenty of playmakers like Mixon and Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell and Dalton Schultz. So this is going to be a huge test for the Green Bay Packers here. So I'm excited to see what both quarterbacks to do. I think it's going to be an offensive shootout. Whoever has the ball last is going to be able to capitalize and lead their team to victory. Neither of them are going to be scared for the moment. But the biggest question is, who else is going to be able to step up? Because, Green Bay doesn't really have any household names on their offense besides Jordan Love and Josh Jacobs. Yeah, they have speedy guys like Watson and Dobbs and Jaden Reed and Tucker Kraft. But you need somebody that's going to be able to step up and to impact the game in a big way. And the Texans need to do the same. Because even though they have plenty more Pro Bowl talent, you need somebody that's going to be able to help C.J. Stroud in the long run. We know what both defenses are capable of. Houston is a top 10 unit. Green Bay is above average. So both of them are going to have a long afternoon. But I think whoever can make the least amount of mistakes is going to win. I'm going to pick the Packers here. I think their home field advantage is going to be a huge factor into this one. Obviously, Houston's only convincing victory, or the one that they've won by more than double digits, was against one of the worst teams in the league. And when you look at the rest of their wins, they beat the Colts by 2. They beat the Bears by 6. They get destroyed by the Minnesota Vikings. They beat the Jaguars by 4, and then the Bills by 3. Against the Packers, it's going to be another tight-knit ball game. And while C.J. Stroud could do everything in his power to try to win the game, I just really don't know how this defense is going to be able to stop Jordan Love, in a 2-minute situation here. So I'll pick the Packers. It's going to be really close. Again, both offenses are going to look sharp. I don't really know if the defenses are going to force any critical takeaways or ones that are going to really impact the game as much, but I'll say Green Bay holds on 31-28. Now we get to an NFC East rivalry in the Meadowlands between the Philadelphia Eagles and the New York Giants. I'll start with the home team here because, they're coming off a very, very poor defeat against the Cincinnati Bengals. It was quite possibly the ugliest game of the entire week. I just don't get it when it comes to Daniel Jones. When he's on the road, he looks fine. He looks promising. He's actually making the plays necessary to try to win the football game. Yet when he's at home in front of his fans at MetLife Stadium, he completely shrinks. It is flat out awful. I mean, last week against the Bengals, or a few days ago against the Bengals, was the first time that he actually scored a touchdown at home. I mean, let's put this in proper perspective. Brian Daboll decided to go for it on 4th down 5 times. They converted on 3 of them. They failed to convert on 2 of them, and that was because he decided to put the ball in his quarterback's hands. That pretty much summed up the entire night. Let me repeat that. On the 2 failed 4th down attempts, Brian Daboll elected to put the ball in Daniel Jones's hands. So that right there summed up why the Giants lost this game. Their defense did everything they could. Yeah, they gave up a 47-yard touchdown to Joe Burrow on 3rd and 18, but they didn't give up any more points for the rest of the first half. They sacked him 4 times. They shut down the run. They kept Jamar Chase and T. Higgins in check. They were doing everything they could to try to win the game, but when it was time for Daniel Jones to deliver, he completely shrank. It took until a garbage time drive for him to eclipse 200 yards. And I get that Malik Neighbors was hurt and he didn't have Devin Singletary, but this is why they're paying him $40 million, so that he can lift his team up from adversity, for him to actually live up to the investment. And when it was time for him to actually deliver the team a win, he completely failed. And Greg Joseph did not make anything better because he whipped on a 47-yard field goal that could have tied the game late in the 4th quarter. And ultimately, the defense broke down. They gave up a 30-yard touchdown to Chase Brown. They couldn't fumble. They couldn't recover a huge fumble by Zach Moss as it rolled out of bounds. And, the Giants defense just wore out, and they had no more gas for the rest of the game. So I just really don't know how the Giants are going to be able to win this game, especially without Andrew Thomas for the rest of the year. That is a huge blow, because without Malik Neighbors and without Devin Singletary, the last thing that you could afford is to lose your best offensive lineman. So I expect this to be a close game, but when it comes to the Philadelphia Eagles, I'm just sick and tired of Nick Sirianni. Actually, their cleanest performance of the entire season. Saquon Barkley was held in check. He only had, 46 yards on 18 carries, something around then. Yet Jalen Hurts still threw for 264 yards. He had a couple touchdown passes, no turnovers, 1 sack taken. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, they looked phenomenal in their returns from injury. The defense sacked Deshaun Watson 5 times. And the only touchdown that they give up was on a blocked field goal at the end of the first half. Yet all of that got completely spoiled because Nick Sirianni decided to chirp at the fans for heckling him and for chanting "Fire Nick," which was allegedly the report. And not only that, but he decided to bring his kids to the post-game media session and to deflect any questions that came his way about him doing this to the fans. So we're like, oh, what'd you say? Yeah? Oh, I can't hear you anymore. I don't know what he actually said, but it was somewhere around the block. And he pretty much deflected off of that and pretty much had nothing really legitimate to say about the matter. Nick Sirianni is just an immature clown at this point. I mean, the fact that the fans were heckling him was validated because the team has just been on such a downward spiral over the last year and a half. You start off last season 10-1. You're in control of the NFC, and yet you lose 6 out of your final 7 games in one of the biggest collapses in NFL history. Then you head into this year. You don't have a single win by double digits. Your offense is, you barely beat the 1-5 Cleveland Browns with a third-string running back and an albatross of a contract at quarterback. This was the first time that your offense didn't turn the freaking ball over all season long. Your defense feasts on bad opponents. There's no leadership. There's no chemistry. And nobody was looking at Nick Sirianni to say, oh, yeah, you go ahead, coach. We appreciate it. They were looking at him like, what the heck is this clown doing? This our head coach? Seriously? And this is why they're only 3-2. The fact that they even have a winning record is saying a lot, because the only reason why they've been winning games is because they get bailed out by talent. And then when they go up against the really good teams, they get humbled and get completely blown off the field. So Nick Sirianni has proven that he has none of the intangibles or the traits that make anybody a successful head coach. It's one of the biggest reasons why he is on the hot seat right now. And I mean, he's making Rich Kotite look respectable. Do you know how impossible that is? Rich Kotite. Jets fans know who I'm talking about. The guy that led him to a 1-15 season in 1996. Yeah, Nick Sirianni is somehow looking worse than that guy right now. So, even when they win, they still get into the news for all of the wrong reasons. And he's all bravado. He's all talk. I'm literally at a loss of words because, to be quite honest, when have you ever seen a head coach in a professional football league or a professional sports display this type of behavior towards their own fans? Do you understand what types of fans are watching your product every single week? You're in Philadelphia. They are unapologetic in letting you know just how good or just how bad you are on any given minute. Forget about any given Sunday or any given day. Any given freaking minute. They're one of the most passionate sports fan bases in all of America. And again, their chants are justified. Their complaints are justified and validated because you're a freaking immature clown that can't display any leadership or actually can't accept any accountability towards what's been going wrong with this football team. So I'm freaking sick and tired of dealing with Nick Sirianni. And to be quite honest, I have them winning this football game, but I think we all know how this is going to go. It's going to be close. It's going to come down to the wire, and they're going to feast on, and their talent is going to bail them out towards the end, and Daniel Jones is going to completely implode. That's what's going to happen. So I'll pick Philly. Saquon's going to get his revenge, but it's nowhere going to be close. I'll say they win. What did I have the final score? 20-16. So same thing as last week. Defense plays great against a horrible offense, and the offense barely does enough at the end. That's exactly what's going to happen. So this is why I hate the Eagles fan base. This is why I hate the Eagles in general, because with all that smack that they talk, they have no reason to back it up. I understand that they won a Super Bowl in 2017, but what have they done to back that one up? What have they done since then? It's flat out disgraceful. And when he pretty much deflected towards the media, and when he brought his kids to the post-game media session to kind of play the victim card, the type of message that he sent to his fan base, to the locker room, to the coaches, to the general manager, to the owner, Jeffrey Lurie, is, I don't want you to judge me off of the things that you're supposed to judge head coaches on. And that is showing leadership. That is trying to win football games. That is trying to elevate this team towards success. Because clearly, over the last year and a half, He has not been able to do that whatsoever. And if it wasn't for Jerry Jones going off on a radio host, I'd be going on longer. But for now, we got a bigger football game to talk about. We got the Minnesota Vikings versus the Detroit Lions. This is going to be a really fun football game to watch here. You know, the Vikings are undefeated. The Lions are 4-1. These two teams are going to go toe-to-toe when it comes for the NFC North lead. And I'm surprised that this isn't America's Game of the Week. But we got a Super Bowl rematch coming up, so makes sense. Vikings are coming off a bye week, so there isn't really too much to talk about them just yet. Let's start with Detroit. So we all knew that they were going to seek revenge after last year's controversial ending against the Dallas Cowboys. They felt they got robbed. They felt they got screwed. And they had so much pent-up aggression over the last, 7 to 8 months? So 9 to 10, probably longer. You get the point. And when they entered Jerry World on Jerry Jones's birthday, they unleashed hell. If you were to tell me that Amon-Ra St. Brown was only going to finish with under 40 yards and that Sam Laporta was only going to have one catch, I would think, all right, this is going to be a closer game. You know, it's going to come toe-to-toe, but I think the Lions will be able to pull it out in the end. And instead, it was a flat-out butt-whooping. Jared Goff threw for 315 yards and 3 touchdowns. Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, they combined for 140-plus on the ground. And, I mean, there was no stopping them. They were flat-out toying around with the Cowboys defense from start to finish. They even tried getting Taylor Decker and Penei Sewell in the end zone, but one of those passes was broken up, and the other got called back because of a penalty. So it would have been at least fun to see them get in the end zone, but to actually help Dallas, they better be thankful that this wasn't a 50 burger or, a 56 to 7 point defeat, because be quite frank, the score should have been a lot worse than what it was. And to be quite frank, the offense wasn't even the most surprising part about this game. It was Detroit's defense. And it was definitely a Pyrrhic victory without question, because Aiden Hutchinson, he suffered a broken leg on just the second play of the third quarter. And if you haven't seen the injury, good. It's too gruesome and ugly to watch. I had to look away the minute I saw it snap, because, dear Lord, it was flat out devastating for someone that was on pace to win Defensive Player of the Year. And he was their best player on the whole defensive side of the ball. So he is a huge, huge loss to what Detroit's defense was trying to accomplish. But when he got carted off the field, the Lions still didn't let the Cowboys score a touchdown. Dak Prescott, he only threw for 178 yards. He got sacked 4 times. Brian Branch had 2 interceptions. They couldn't run the ball whatsoever. Even the freaking backups turned it over 3 times. This is now the 4th straight loss at home for the Dallas Cowboys, and it has been in blowout fashion every single time. You trail 48-16 against the Green Bay Packers. Then they get their butts whipped 44-19 against the Saints. Then they fall behind 28-6 to Baltimore. And now this, 47-9 on Jerry Jones's birthday. And because the Cowboys have a bye week, I'm going to get into this under this side note. Jerry Jones had the audacity to go on the radio the next day and to threaten a radio host job for criticizing how Jerry Jones has not really done anything in the offseason and how this team hasn't really done anything in the last 30 years. Valid questions, yet he still decides to threaten the radio host's job security and to say, oh, I'm going to find somebody that is going to ask me more favorable questions. Are you freaking kidding me? Like, that shows to me that the Dallas Cowboys do not give a crap about winning, that they only care about attention, ratings, mediocrity, and jersey sales. That's all that it matters. Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb have been given boatloads of money and they have not fulfilled to their contracts. Mike McCarthy is just a bumblebee of a head coach that just does nothing but stand on the sidelines and be a poster boy for Jerry Jones. The defense has massively regressed. Obviously, they haven't had Micah Parsons or DeMarcus Lawrence, but whenever they're losing games, they're pretty much throwing their teammates under the bus towards the media or on their own podcast. And I mean, this is rightfully deserved because when you barely do anything in the offseason and when you're just content with mediocrity and when you're content with just coasting through bad teams, yet getting destroyed by the really good ones, this is the price you pay. And it's been a 30-year legacy of failure. It's going to go on even longer as long as Jerry Jones continues to remain stubborn and delusional, because until he finally stays out of the way, they're just going to continue to run through the same carousel year after year after year. They could tank, but they're never going to do it because they're content with their own freaking stupidity. So I have no sympathy for Dallas whatsoever. They're utter trash. And to be quite honest, even if they make the playoffs, we all know what their fate is going to be. They're going to get bounced out of the first round. And if they somehow get past it, they're going to get completely blown out in the second. That's exactly what's going to happen. And the Detroit Lions, they had so much adrenaline. They completely kicked the Cowboys' ass from start to finish. And, can't take anything away from them. They look like one of the most feared teams in the league, but I still think that their biggest challenges are yet to arrive. So heading into Minnesota, this is going to be a huge one for both teams here. One of them not only is going to have full control of their division, but they're going to assert themselves as the best team in the NFC because the 49ers have been struggling. The NFC East is such a joke, and the NFC South is pretty good, but you really don't know where they could really be heading into November or December. So Minnesota and Detroit, these two teams, they're going to be neck and neck with each other throughout the whole course of the season. So I actually have the Vikings winning this game, and I'll tell you why. Not only do I think that the Lions are going to struggle on defense without Aiden Hutchinson, but the Vikings are going to be well rested. Their offense is going to get their focus back. We know what Brian Flores' defense is capable of on any given night, and his unit is 10 times better than Mike Zimmer's Cowboys defense by a long shot. They play more aggressively. They have way more playmakers on all three levels. And Minnesota's offense has a lot more playmakers that Detroit has to take into account for. You got Justin Jefferson. You got Jordan Addison. We don't know what's going to happen with Aaron Jones. He's still dealing with that hip injury. And Sam Darnold has had a tremendous bounce back start to his career. So this is going to be a pretty fun game to watch for both teams. We all know what both offenses are capable of. These defenses are incredibly opportunistic, but I think the Vikings' home field advantage is going to play a huge factor here. Again, they have a more aggressive defense. They have more playmakers, and I think that'll be just enough for them to squeak it out at the end. So I'll say the Vikings win 31-28. Again, I just really don't know how Detroit's going to do without Aiden Hutchinson because it is a huge, huge loss that they might not be able to overcome. So let's see how many games we have to go through. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we're going to get through these as fast as we can. We got the Seattle Seahawks versus the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta's coming off an unexpected victory against the Carolina Panthers. There's not really too much to talk about there. They ran for close to 200 yards. Algier had one of the best games of his career. He had 105 yards on 18 touches. Bijan Robinson, he had 95, a couple scores. Kirk Cousins didn't really need to do that much. The defense forced a couple key takeaways in the final three on two of their final three drives. They bent early. They let the Panthers stay in the game, which is what you expected. They're really scrappy. They're going to do whatever they can to put up a good fight. But A.J. Terrell came up with a huge interception midway through the fourth quarter on a potential game-tying drive, which allowed the offense to pull away. And, that's all it really took for the Falcons to win. They just minimized their mistakes. They were more assertive on offense, and they pulled through at the end. So, again, not really too much to talk about there. Seattle, on the other hand, they have taken a huge step back. Their defense has massively regressed over the last 3 weeks, and we all knew that this offense was nothing special. When they were 3-0, they were average at best, yet they could never really click or gel at the perfect time. And against the 49ers, that's exactly what happened. Geno Smith threw an interception on the first drive. Then they fall behind 23-3 early in the third quarter. Then they somehow get back into the game by scoring 14 unanswered points. And, they had a chance to take the lead and seal this victory from their big brother division rival. But Geno Smith, once again, cost his team any opportunity with another back-breaking interception, which allowed the 49ers to put the game away with 2 late touchdown drives. And to be quite honest, if it wasn't for San Francisco stalling out in the red zone on 3 of their first 4 drives of the first half, this score would have been a lot worse, because you had that interception to start the game, then you had a fumble recovery on the kickoff, and then your only points of that period came on the final possession. So, again, the Seahawks, they just keep getting in their own way. They make too many self-inflicted mistakes, and now the defense has massively regressed, and they've been completely exposed. So, they have the talent. They have a rising head coach. They should be good enough to at least stay in the wild card race, but they just can never put it together when it's needed the most. And to be quite honest, I don't even know if they can even have a winning season anymore, just because they've been figured out. So heading into Atlanta, the Falcons are going to be the heavily favored team. I have them winning this game. I think it'll be really close. I think Kirk Cousins and Geno Smith, they're going to be viewed under a big microscope here. They're going to be counted on to really try to lift their teams to victory here, because, Seattle has plenty of playmakers like Kenneth Walker and DK and Tyler Lockett, yet they've been in a 3-week slump. With the Falcons, Kirk Cousins has plenty of playmakers that could really attack anybody on the Seattle defense. Not only do you have a great running game, but you got Drake London and Kyle Pitts and Darnell Mooney. So it's going to be a grudge match. I don't expect too many points to be scored here, but I think, when it matters most, I think this is going to be one of those. I think it's going to be one of those days where Kirk Cousins shows up in the brightest moments. We know that he doesn't always show up against the teams that he needs to beat, but against somebody like Seattle, this is where he really turns into that psycho Kirk mode. And when he goes into the locker room at the end and screams, "You like that?" So I'll say the Falcons win 28-20, because, listen, I trust their defense a lot more, and I think that the more that they keep Geno Smith out of the end zone, the more time that Kirk Cousins is going to have to pull off a game-winning drive or to be able to close it out in the end. So that's what I'll say there. Now we get to the Browns versus the Bengals. It's a battle for Ohio. I mean, I don't really need to go into either of these teams, because I already talked about the Bengals. And with the Browns, I mean, we already know what's holding them back. They have a horrible quarterback. Their O-line is banged up. Yeah, they're getting Nick Chubb back from injury, which is a huge plus. But, I mean, at this point, it's just depressing at this point. I mean, their quarterback has been a complete disaster. They can't block anybody. They can't run the football, without Nick Chubb. And now they traded Amari Cooper to the Buffalo Bills. So they are definitely doing everything they could to sell at the deadline. And Myles Garrett is pretty much the only thing, or the only person, keeping this team afloat. But after the Cincinnati performance against the Giants, who knows? Because the fact of the matter is, Joe Burrow did not look great. He had a great touchdown run to start the game, but then got sacked 4 more times. The next time he got on the board was late in the third quarter. And while he did enough in the fourth quarter to ice the game, it was still one of the ugliest games to watch. They couldn't really run the football up until the final drive. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins were kept in check. And Daniel Jones' self-destruction was really the only reason why Cincinnati was even in the game to begin with. And heading into Cleveland, this is a trap game. Do you understand that Joe Burrow has not won a game in Cleveland in his last 3 starts? Or in his starts at the Dog Pound, he's been sacked 10 times. Do you understand in the last 2 meetings, he's been outscored 56-16? This Browns defense, mainly led by Myles Garrett, has had Joe Burrow's number every time they play in Cleveland. And Deshaun Watson, at this point, all he needs to do is look average, and the rest will take care of itself. Now that they're getting Nick Chubb back, that will probably unlock this offense even more, because the Cincinnati defense does not have a great defense. Last week they looked great, but again, it was against Daniel Jones. I think we can pretty much expect that. Deshaun Watson, not that much better, but Kevin Stefanski has always seemed to have the upper edge against Zach Taylor in these matchups. And we know that Jim Schwartz is one of the greatest defensive minds in the game. We know what he's capable of against Joe Burrow. He could definitely craft a a good enough game plan to completely shut down the Cincinnati offense. So I actually have the Browns winning this game. I know it's crazy, and I know that it's ludicrous. It's probably going to get me on freezing cold takes, but I think that, listen, the Browns defense has always had the edge on Joe Burrow. And once again, Deshaun Watson doesn't really need to be great. He just needs to make sure that he doesn't screw up. And as long as he can hold on to the football and defer to the running game, the rest will take care of itself. So I have the Browns winning 23-10. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be close. Like I said, last two meetings in Cleveland, 56-16, which is flat out stunning. And Halloween is right around the corner, so it works. All right, now we get to the Indianapolis Colts versus the Miami Dolphins. Miami is coming off of a bye week, while the Colts are coming off an ugly victory against the Tennessee Titans. I did not really like what I saw from them. I get that they didn't have Jonathan Taylor and that, the defense has been abysmal, but, the offense, it struggled early on. They picked themselves back up to start this third quarter. They at least did enough to get out in front, and they made the most important plays in the most opportune times. They didn't screw up late in the game, so I'll give them credit where it's due. But if the Titans had a quarterback, they probably would have won this game. Joe Flacco threw for under 200 yards. He threw a horrible interception on his second drive of the game. And to his credit, he had a clutch touchdown pass to Michael Pittman Jr. midway to start early in the fourth quarter. But at the same time, it shouldn't have really come down to that. So heading into this home game against Miami, they could potentially fall into a trap themselves. Obviously, the Dolphins haven't been able to do anything without Tua fully healthy, but they still have plenty of speed on their offense. The Colts have one of the worst defenses in the league. You still have to deal with Achane and Mostert and Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. And the Dolphins defense is a top 10 unit, crazy as it seems. Obviously, they've been losing, and their latest win was against the freaking Patriots with Jacoby Brissett. But I just really don't know what type of performance we're going to get with this Colts offense. They're always so inconsistent. One week they look like a potential playoff team, and the other, they look like they're not really quite ready for that just yet. So I actually have the Dolphins winning this game. It's going to be pretty ugly. I think it'll be sloppy. Both defenses are going to probably stay in it for as long as possible. But when it comes to the Colts, I think they're going to eventually get worn down at the end. I mean, when you have that much speed on Miami's offense, I don't really care who the quarterback is. It could be Tyler Huntley or Skylar Thompson. Hell, they could even sign Ryan Tannehill off the streets. I still think that they have the type of personnel that could really fizzle out this Colts defense, and more importantly, force Joe Flacco to play from behind. Which, honestly, if he's not front running, and if he doesn't have a comfortable lead, then I don't really think he has the capacity to show up in the clutch the way that he used to in the past. So I'll say the Dolphins win 20-13, and I think that's enough for them to get back to 500. So who knows? We'll see what happens there. All right, let's see how many more games we got to get into. I think we've already headed into the 4 o'clock slate. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Starting with the Washington Commanders versus the Carolina Panthers. If only Ron Rivera was still the head coach, this would probably be a fitting revenge game. But obviously, it is not. Washington is coming off a pretty unfortunate loss to the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, they did their best to keep up. They put up a great fight. I thought Jaden Daniels had a really solid game. He had close to 270 yards. He had a couple touchdown passes to Terry McLaurin. But this is pretty much all you really need to know about how this game turned out. So the defense comes up with a huge interception on the opening drive. The offense goes down the field, but a Travis Jones sack forces a field goal. Throughout the rest of the game, Baltimore only punted the ball one time, and since then, they were able to get points on every single drive. Derrick Henry was phenomenal, per usual. Let me pull up my notes here because I have the numbers. He ran for 132 yards and 2 touchdowns on 24 carries. Lamar Jackson, he was pretty much unstoppable. He had 360 total yards from scrimmage, and they held on to the ball for 36 minutes. They were a perfect 6 for 10 on third down, and they couldn't get off the field. Washington's defense had no answer for Baltimore's dynamic offense. And while Jaden Daniels did his best to keep up, they only scored 2 touchdowns on 9 drives. They stalled out a bunch. They couldn't really run the ball without Brian Robinson. They were 4 for 12 on 3rd down. And, they never really took a commanding lead. And against a team like the Baltimore Ravens, you got to be able to find a way to jump out in front or to make sure that you get the touchdowns needed to stay in the race. And they just kept falling behind. The more that the Ravens offense was on the field, the harder it was for Jaden Daniels to try to keep up. So that's what really happened in that ball game. And with the Panthers, I already talked about it earlier. They put up a great fight. Chuba Hubbard had 92 yards. Dalton had a couple sweet touchdown passes to Deontay Johnson and Xavier Ligon. And it was only an 8-point game midway through the 4th quarter, but that interception to A.J. Terrell really killed off all the momentum. Atlanta was able to pull away. And on the final 2 drives, they turned it over on downs, and Dalton threw another interception. So really the margin for error was that small. Again, I got to give them credit for playing with a lot of passion and playing with a lot of heart, but Falcons were just a better team, and the Panthers made costly mistakes at the end that, could have kept them in this ball game. So heading into FedEx Field, or it's not even FedEx Field anymore. I think they actually changed the name of the stadium. But the point is, heading into Washington, D.C., I think that the Commanders are going to be able to bounce back. I think it'll be a more convincing victory. They still have one of the most unstoppable offenses in the league, and I think it's a great opportunity for their defense to really bounce back against a vastly inferior Carolina offense. I can see the Panthers come out hot early on, but again, they're going to get fizzled out, and they're going to get overwhelmed by a vastly better football team. So I'll say the Commanders win 34-13, and that will be more than enough to stay in first place in the NFC East. So now we get to the Los Angeles Rams versus the Las Vegas Raiders. LA is coming off a bye week. They're back home at SoFi Stadium, and the Raiders are officially trash. And it's not just because they lost 32-13 to the Steelers. It's not just because, their defense had no answers against the run and that their offense couldn't really do anything until garbage time. It was the fact that they finally traded away Devontae Adams to the New York Jets. He's reunited with Aaron Rodgers. And now that he's gone, the only player that they can really have, the only real player that they have to rely on is Max Crosby. They don't have a good quarterback. They don't have a running game. They don't really have any impactful offensive players besides Brock Bowers and maybe Jacoby Myers. Their play caller is Luke Getsy. And this is what happens when you barely do anything in the offseason. Listen, they signed Christian Wilkins to a bunch of money, but he's out for the year because of a Jones fracture. You drafted Brock Bowers, who's a rookie. But, again, you didn't really do anything to vastly improve your roster or to elevate yourselves into a higher tier. You signed Gardner Minshew, who's okay in short sample sizes, but you can't really count on him to be a full-time starter. Aiden O'Connell is not an upgrade. In fact, he's probably worse. The running game is the running back room consists of Alexander Madison and Zamir White, who are number 2 options at best. And defensively, if Max Crosby is not wrecking the game, then they're going to get blown out and they're going to stay on the field for way too long. So as bad as I feel for Antonio Pierce, this is what happens when you really don't do anything to make the team better. So that's all I can really say there. I guess the Steelers, listen, they got off to a great start. Alexander Madison did a great job on the opening drive. He led them to their first touchdown. The defense, they only held the Pittsburgh Steelers to 2 field goals. They were up by 1 midway through the second quarter. And then the minute Dylan Laube fumbled the football at the 30-yard line, it blew wide open. Justin Fields, he didn't really have that great of a game through the air, but he still ran for a couple touchdowns. Najee Harris ran for over 100. And, they didn't really need to play that exciting. But since that turnover, the Raiders coughed it up 2 more times. They gave up a blocked punt. And their second touchdown of the game came at garbage time. So that's pretty much what you have to expect when you don't have Devontae Adams and when you don't have Jacoby Myers. You're just going to get completely run off the field by a grittier and a hungrier defense. So there isn't really too much to take away from there. Pittsburgh pulled off an expected victory. They did get a couple breaks from a few penalties that could have been costly. if they weren't thrown, because I think when Justin Fields threw an interception to Divine Diablo, it got called back for a penalty, and I'm not really sure. I didn't watch the full game entirely, but apparently there were a couple of flags that definitely bailed the Steelers out. But all that aside, Pittsburgh was able to hold on. Their offense did the bare minimum, and the defensive special teams carried them to their fourth victory of the season. So it was a great way to bounce back, but they have a bigger test ahead, which we'll get into in just a bit. When it comes to this game, I got the Rams winning. I think Cooper Kupp, who knows if he's going to be healthy enough. The reports are saying that he's getting a lot better. He's starting to take the field, and he's trying to get himself back onto the football field, in time for Sunday. But even if he's not there, I still think that the Rams have a way better offense. And more importantly, I think their defense is more than capable of shutting down a Raiders offense with Aiden O'Connell at quarterback. Who knows? Crazier things have happened. I mean, we didn't expect them to come back from a 10-point deficit against the Baltimore Ravens. But I think on the road, I just really don't know I just really don't see Aiden O'Connell really lifting this team up to victory. So I'll say the Rams win 27-14. It'll be a pretty boring grudge match, but I have a lot more faith in Matthew Stafford, and I think they're going to be well better coached and more mentally prepared to try to squeak this one out. So that's all I'll really say there. Now we get to the Super Bowl rematch between the Chiefs and the 49ers. Kansas City is coming off a bye week. They're heading out to the West Coast to Santa Clara to take on the 49ers, who are back to 500 at 3-3. Did what they needed to do against the Seattle Seahawks. They nearly choked away another double-digit lead, but their defense forced 2 turnovers. Their special teams recovered a fumble on a kickoff. Brock Purdy threw 3 touchdowns. He had an efficient performance. They were able to run the ball well without Jordan Mason in the second half. And, I mean, they made better plays down the stretch, which is really all you could ask for against a vastly inferior division rival. But I think we know what's going to happen in this one. The 49ers, they technically have more talent, but the Chiefs have a better quarterback. They have a better head coach. They have a more aggressive defense. And more importantly, they laid out the blueprint as to how to beat the 49ers. Their defense has to do just enough on offense. And as long as you have Patrick Mahomes, your offense is going to stay in it for the long run. It doesn't matter if Rashee Rice is out or if Hollywood Brown isn't going to play or if Isaiah Pacheco is still on IR. You still have enough pieces that could really keep this 49ers defense on its heels. And until Brock Purdy emerges out of the shadows and establishes himself as one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the game, then we're going to expect the Chiefs to pull away. We're going to expect the Chiefs to win this game convincingly. So I'll say Kansas City wins. It's going to be close early on. The 49ers are probably going to get off to a 14-0 start, but the Chiefs are going to be able to tighten up. They're going to be able to get their focus back. And once that happens, then the 49ers are going to be in trouble. So I'll say the Chiefs win 38-20. It's not going to be as hyped of a matchup as some people would hope. And I can only hope, and I can only imagine that Tom Brady just gets a really great ball game, because he's been getting a lot of blowouts. He's had a couple of exciting ones, but it's been mainly blowout after blowout after blowout. So that's all I can really say there. Sunday Night Football, we have the New York Jets versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh's coming off a pretty unexpected victory against the Raiders. Again, offense didn't really play that great, but their defense and special teams played lights out. 3 forced fumbles, a blocked punt, and Aiden O'Connell didn't really do too much. Only threw 1 touchdown pass, which was in garbage time. And, they got off to a slow start, but all it took was 1 fumble from Dylan Lobby to open up the floodgates. The Jets, on the other hand, they're 2-4. They proved that coaching was not the issue on Monday night against the Buffalo Bills. They got off to a great start in the first half against Buffalo. Their offense was unstoppable. Aaron Rodgers threw a vintage Hail Mary to end the first half. They were only down by 3 points. And then when they returned to the field for the third quarter, it was flat out frustrating to watch. They committed way too many penalties. They committed 8 in the second half. or 7 in the second half, I should say. They finished with 11 for the entire night. Their offense got into scoring territory 3 times. They failed to reach the end zone, all 3 of them. Greg Sterling attempted 3 field goals and doinked on 2 of them. Their defense eventually caved down the stretch. They let the Bills take the lead 23-20. However, Aaron Rodgers still had 3 minutes and 25 minutes left to try to win the game, to at least send it into overtime. And before the 2-minute warning, they were already near the 50. But on 3rd and 16, he chucks a deep pass down the right side to Mike Williams, who was open on the play. The ball was underthrown. Mike Williams falls as he tries to make the adjustment, and Teron Johnson dove across for the game-sealing interception. And again, all it took was 1 first down for Buffalo to run out the clock, and Josh Allen did that successfully with a quarterback keeper up the left side. So, I mean, once again, coaching was not the issue. It was leadership, and it was the offense. Right now, it is not that much different than what it was with Zach Wilson over the last 2 years. Maybe getting Davante Adams is the boost that they need to appease Aaron Rodgers, to try to calm him down, to try to unlock this offense. But demoting Nathaniel Hackett didn't solve anything. Firing Robert Saleh, did not really solve anything. Because the fact of the matter is, the defense is once again the only reason why they're still competitive in these games, and the offense completely shuts down at the worst possible times. At least you could say that Aaron Rodgers is a slight upgrade over Zach Wilson, but again, the results are the same. They keep losing. They're 2-4, and I don't really know how getting Davante Adams is gonna help this team in the long run, because the Jets have the same record as the Raiders do right now. You know, there's just too much drama going on. They have way too many bigger problems. They have way bigger problems that they got to address. And listen, I get that Aaron Rodgers is a future Hall of Famer, but there's a reason why he's only won 1 Super Bowl in who knows how long, in 14 years. It's because he doesn't have the mental toughness or the intangibles that many other Hall of Fame quarterbacks have, that to lift them into the Super Bowl. You know, when he hasn't had the expectations, he's shown up. When he does have huge expectations, he completely shrinks. But on Sunday Night Football, I think this will be a great way to bounce back. You know, the Steelers are starting Russell Wilson for the first time this season. It looks like he's 100% from that calf injury. And I'm kind of curious to see how Pittsburgh plays. You know, Justin Fields has clearly helped them win football games, but I can understand why Pittsburgh would try to want to head in this direction. They want to see what Russell Wilson has left in the tank. They want to see this offense come out more aggressive. They want to be able to see Russell Wilson be able to push the ball down the field more often. And while Arthur Smith still wants to run the football as much as possible, I just think that from their standpoint, they don't want a conservative game plan. They want to be able to throw Russell Wilson in and see what he has left. So I think the Jets will win, though. I think their defense will definitely be more aggressive. We obviously know what their secondary is capable of on any given night. And I think that with Davante Adams making his first start as a Jet, I think it's going to unlock this offense. They need to run the ball a lot better. That's for damn sure. But with Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson, yeah, that is a scary duo to watch. And I can't wait to see what happens here. I think it'll be close because we all know what the Steelers defense is capable of. They're not going to go down without a fight, especially at home on a primetime stage. But I think the Jets will make just enough plays to squeak one out 24-21. And I've used that phrase a lot. So I think there's a theme here. Now we get to a Monday night doubleheader. We got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the Baltimore Ravens at 8:15. And then the LA Chargers versus the Arizona Cardinals. So let's start with the first one between Tampa and Baltimore. This is obviously going to be the more exciting game. It's not the first time that Lamar Jackson and Baker Mayfield have squared up against each other, but I think this is going to be the most exciting. You know, both of them have their teams positioned for the playoffs. Lamar is coming off a phenomenal game where they only had 1 punt and score. And, you know, after that interception to start the game, they were able to get on the board. They were unstoppable in the second half. Derrick Henry had 132 yards. Lamar Jackson, 360. And, you know, their offense was pretty much unstoppable for most of the afternoon. And their defense only gave up 2 touchdowns on 9 drives. So they did more than enough to try to win that football game. Tampa, they twisted us in a bunch of different directions. They get off to a 17-0 start in the first quarter. Then Baker throws 3 interceptions and and the Saints score 20 unanswered points to eventually take a 3-point lead heading into halftime. And then when the third quarter starts, Tampa gets their focus back, and they pretty much blow the Saints out on a 27-0 run to win 51-27. So Baker Mayfield had a perfect passer rating in the second half. They ran for 277 yards for the entire game without Rachaad White, mind you. Chris Godwin was phenomenal. He had 125 yards and a couple touchdowns and 11 catches. He had a huge 55-yard balls and a huge interception from Zion McCollum to start the fourth quarter. Really blew the game wide open. So I think both offenses are going to play outstanding. Baker Mayfield is going to do everything he can to try to win the game against a not-so-great Baltimore defense. And Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry are just one of the scariest duos in the league. We all thought it would be this way heading into the year, and they have completely lived up to the hype. I think the Ravens will win just for that reason alone. Lamar Jackson has been near perfect against the NFC East since he started in 2018. And while I think Baker Mayfield will do everything in his power to win, I just really don't know. I just really don't see him pulling off a game-winning drive when you got Lamar Jackson on the other sideline. So I'll say the Ravens win 33-31, but unless Tampa's defense plays its most convincing performance of the season, I just think they're going to get completely run off the field. It's going to be nice weather. It's going to be a nice Monday night. It's in Florida, but I mean, that's perfect. That's perfect for the Ravens and what they want to accomplish on offense. And as long as their defense has a pulse, they're going to be in good shape. For the second Monday night game, we got the LA Chargers versus the Arizona Cardinals. Both of them are pretty subpar. LA's offense is really mediocre, but they have a top 10 defense. And the Cardinals, on the other hand, are one of the more up and down teams in the league. 1 week they're blowing out the Rams, or they're coming back from a 13-point deficit against the 49ers, yet they get smoked by the Commanders, the Lions, the Bills, and then just recently against the Packers. They give up 4 touchdowns to Jordan Love, and on 3 straight possessions in the second half, they fumble the ball away. So they're capable of moving the ball down the field, and they are capable of stealing games away from legitimate teams. But when it comes down to the ones that are really trying to elevate themselves into the playoff picture, the Cardinals get completely run off the field. It doesn't matter if it's in the first half or in the second half. Eventually, they're going to get completely destroyed. And with the Chargers, they won the game. They beat the Broncos 23-16. They completely shut down Bo Nix through 3 quarters. They only gave up 5 completions on 14 pass attempts for 27 yards. They picked them off on the first pass. And yeah, while they gave up 16 unanswered points in the fourth quarter, the effort was too little too late. The Chargers offense, on the other hand, they are really average. They can run the ball extremely well, which has really been the number one talking point when it comes to Jim Harbaugh's group. They want to run the ball as much as possible. J.K. Dobbins, he was 4 yards short of 100. And while Justin Herbert spread the ball around to 9 different receivers, they really let Denver hang around in the second half. Let me pull up the numbers here. They only had 104 more yards in the second half, 41 if you count out the field goal drive to start the third quarter. But what really helped LA out in this game was they stayed on the field for as much as possible. They held on to the ball for 37 minutes. They were 11 for 18 on third down. And the more that Bo Nix completely sucked, the more opportunities that the Chargers were given to keep putting the game away. So this is going to be a really interesting grudge match here. Both offenses have struggled. LA obviously has the better defense, and I think that will eventually pay off in this matchup. I think both quarterbacks are going to do whatever they can to try to keep this a competitive game, but the Chargers, and more importantly, both of them can run the ball extremely well, but I have a little more faith in Justin Herbert, and more importantly, I think this defense is a hell of a lot better, which is saying a lot considering where they were over the last few years with Brandon Staley. It'll be close, but I think Jim Harbaugh will have this team, in better shape. They'll make sure that they play with a tougher mindset, and they don't really need to go out and hang 45 points. They just need to play complementary football and minimize their mistakes. So I'll say the Chargers win 24-20. All right, that just about does it for Week 7. Let me go down to ESPN and just see if I missed any teams because there are some of them heading into a bye week. Already talked about Thursday night. The London game happened. Let's see what happened. Let's see what else we got to talk about. Cowboys are heading into a bye week. I think we discussed them. So, yeah, I don't really think there's anything else to talk about. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe for additional content. And leave a comment down below. Who do you think is going to win, and how do you think your team performed? Week 7 is definitely going to be exciting. This season is far from over because when you think one team is great or when you think one team sucks, things can always flip upside down like that. So we'll see you next week. Have a great rest of your night. And hopefully we get a Yankees-Mets World Series because as somebody that grew up in Fairfield, Connecticut, it'll be fun to see that matchup take place. But have a great rest of your week, everyone. And I'll see you next time. Peace.